So two things. One, I'm not going to do an advertising for the company. So that's the first thing. So nothing about Uniplaces. If you want to know about it afterwards, you can ask me. And the second thing is it's a little bit tangential, the presentation, because it's about, so I believe like the thing you need to do to scale is you need to have well-functioning autonomous teams, okay? And so how do you get well-functioning autonomous teams? So one aspect of that is something called group intelligence. And so I'm going to give a short presentation about group intelligence. And I'm going to be bending down, pressing my buttons here. So it's also a talk. It's actually a sub kind of bit of a talk I gave in Berlin once called Hunter-Gatherers and Software Development. It's a section of that. The rest deals with anthropology and human behavior. This bit deals with group intelligence and a little tiny bit of neuroscience for those that are interested. But it relates to building a high productive workplace. Okay? Second thing, a disclaimer. So, like, as that says, so my knowledge is based on failing a lot and listening to really smart people and reading research done by really smart people, much smarter than I am. And so, you know, I don't want to take any credit for anything here. I'm a developer from the beginning, a very long time ago. I've lived and worked in the UK, Sweden, Germany, Spain, now Portugal. I'm an adopted Swede, and I have about, well, just over 20 years of software development experience, and I'd say I'm still learning. So it's what we do is not easy. I think sometimes we tend to try to simplify the thing we do, building software. We try to building organizations to build software. We tend to kind of oversimplify that and think like, why is it hard? Like, how come this doesn't work? It's because it's hard. It's really, really hard. First thing is, what is group intelligence? So this is the ability to solve complex cognitive problems effectively across domains and over time. Okay? And when I say the thing that makes it group intelligence is in a group, right? So, and the question is, are some groups better at this than others? Right? Are some groups of human beings better at this than others? So some teams, are they better at it than others? And the good news is it exists. There is such a thing as group intelligence. Some groups do outperform other groups consistently over time and across domains. And this was proven by some research done by Anita Woolley and Thomas Malone. And they did a really interesting experiment. So what they did was they gave subjects aged 18 to 60 IQ tests, and then they randomly assigned them to various groups, and they asked them to complete several tasks, right? So some of the tasks were brainstorming, decision making, and some of them were complex problem solving, okay? And then the team was given an intelligence score based on how well they performed, okay? And so what the research's aim was to find what is consistently the same in different teams that score highly compared to teams that score lowly. So what are the predictive qualities of a team to make sure that they perform well? So what is group intelligence based upon? What is it correlated with? Okay, so we have a little bit of bad news first. And this is that it's only weakly correlated to the average IQ of the group members. Okay? So, like, having smart people does not mean you have a smart team. Okay? So, many managers that I still meet today do not understand this. There's an intuitive feeling that humans have that if I have a team of smart people, they will make a smarter team, right? And then a team of not so smart people. And I would say even devs are maybe, and people who used to be devs, people involved in the tech industry, are worse at this than even business people. that we put an over importance on the IQ of our team members. Okay? And so if you have one person trying to solve a task on their own, IQ is really important, right? But if you have a team of people trying to solve a task together, IQ is not important. If you don't take anything else away today, take that away. Like, it's not important. It's not correlated. So what is it correlated strongly with, right? And there are three things that it's correlated strongly with. So one is the, I have to press again, apparently. The conversational equality of the group. So this is that one person does not dominate the conversations within the team, that each member of the team speaks as equally as possible. So the more equal, the better. The more each individual in the team speaks equally and the time is divided up amongst them, then the team perform better. So if you have one or two people dominating your team, it will not perform as well. And it makes sense, because if you think of a team a bit like you think of a brain, where you have in your brain, you have neurons passing information to each other, and that, like, the better that works, the smarter you are as a species. If you have many members of your team and they're passing information freely all amongst the network and not just through one central hub, for instance, you're going to have more information flowing freely and therefore a better solution at the end of it, right? So it makes sense. Okay, so the first one is information, how you speak equally. The second one is the average EQ of the group members. Okay, so the higher the average EQ of your group members, the more group intelligence the group has, the better it performs. And for those who don't know what EQ is, the EQ is this. That's a proper dictionary definition. So it's basically empathy. You can think of it as empathy. So if you are, empathic towards your teammates, if you care about how well they're doing, how they are privately, the kind of things we associate with teams, we've all been in high-functioning teams where it feels great to go to work. It feels like a family. It feels like your friends. You go out after work together. You enjoy being in each other's company. You care what's happening to each other. That's why, right? Because you have this EQ. And then, interestingly, some of you will really love this, it's also strongly correlated to the number of females in the group, okay? And when I say this, I don't mean diversity, so i.e. up to 50% and then, that's the best. I mean, all female groups do better than 50% female and 50% male. Like, female groups are more intelligent than mixed male and female groups. Sorry. So, a little caveat, the researchers who did this research, they're males, well, most of them, there's a couple of females in the team, they have a hypothesis as to why this is true. I don't know, there's not been a follow-up study to test it, but they say it's because generally females score higher on average EQ. So having more females means you have individuals with higher EQ, and they say it's the EQ, not the fact that you're female, that's important, right? I would say the jury's out, we don't know, okay? So I wouldn't make assumptions. I would just say the research shows more females is better, right? In a tech business, you're unlikely to reach 50% anyway, so, just get as many as possible. So what does it mean for the modern workplace, right? Like, if we're building teams, like if we're assembling teams now, if we're tech leaders doing this, what does it mean? It means rockstar teams don't guarantee success, right? It's a myth. It's only a myth. Like, stab it whenever you see it. Whenever your CEO says, we need a rockstar team to solve this problem, say, no, you don't. You need a really well-functioning team, okay? When you're hiring, it means that humility is better than arrogance, right? So in other words, teams of less smart but more humble developers will outperform teams of very smart but arrogant developers. Okay? So when I'm hiring, the number one thing I look for is humility first. Okay? if I get any sense of like arrogance, I'm not hiring. So you want humble people who will listen to other people's point of view, who will hear out their team members, who won't dominate a conversation, and who have empathy for their fellow workers. Okay? It also means we need more females in software development, right? Like, we know this anyway, but like, we really need more females in software development. So, you know, if you have 2 equal candidates, hire the female. Maybe controversially, even if they're not equal, hire the female. And then to link in with this, and it'll loop back, trust me. So a little bit about your brain, a little bit of neuroscience that links in with this. It ties into group intelligence, okay? So can anybody tell me what molecule this is? Any chemists? Anybody want to guess? No guesses? Really? Nobody's brave enough to make one guess? No. So this is oxytocin. Okay? Close enough. So oxytocin is produced by the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is the part of the brain that links your hormones with your nervous system. Okay, so your brain is your nervous system, and then you have an endocrine system which pumps hormones into your blood, right? And this is the bit of the brain that links those two together. And oxytocin is produced by that part. And it seems to have a really interesting role in, for instance, maternal bonding and social affiliation. And it does some really interesting things. It increases feelings of optimism and increases feelings of self-esteem. Okay? So the more self-esteem and optimism you have, the more likely you are to succeed at things. This has also been documented. So, which in turn leads to optimism and self-esteem, right? If you succeed. And it's like a really nice spiral. Okay? And then we get back to teams, and it also enhances trust. It creates increased levels of generosity and increased empathy. Okay? And there's been some really interesting research with this where they get people to sniff oxytocin. So you can sniff it. It's like, it works. Like, you don't have to have it injected or anything. So they basically give people like vials of oxytocin and get them to sniff it. And then they do kinds of tests on them, like test their generosity, like have someone, you know, ask for some money, or have a situation where they have to trust somebody they've never met before. And if you sniffed oxytocin before you do this, you have more empathy and you are more generous, you'll give more money, and you trust people more. Okay? So this is a very good thing. So maybe we should make everybody sniff it all the time, because society would be so much better. But it increases empathy, right? So going back to what we said before, increased levels of trust and empathy should lead to higher group intelligence, right? Because we just said group intelligence was at least in part dependent on EQ, which is dependent on trust and empathy, okay? As I just said. So, therefore, if we want higher performance, we should want higher levels of oxytocin. Because remember, we produce this. Like, it's a natural hormone in our body. It's not artificial. We produce it all the time, right? So what we want to do is we want behaviors that inhibit the production of oxytocin. We want to reduce or eliminate those behaviors. And we also want to encourage behaviors that stimulate the production of oxytocin, okay? Because we want more oxytocin. So we don't want to stop people producing their own, and we want to encourage their bodies to produce more. So how can we get more oxytocin? Well, one is swimming or brisk walking. So exercise releases oxytocin. So you know those kind of startup cultures of like, you can exercise on your work time, or we'll give you a membership of a gym club. This is really good business sense. There's a reason. It's not just a nice benefit you can put in your job ad. It actually makes your teams smarter. Okay? Another kind of perk that you'll see, massages. They also release oxytocin. If you have a massage, you release oxytocin. Or physical contact with someone you care about, like hugging and holding hands. Maybe you want to hug and hold hands in your team. Maybe not. But, you know, massages we can implement at least, right? So what reduces oxytocin? Like, that's what we should promote. What should we avoid? Okay. So one is unhappiness. If you're unhappy, you don't produce oxytocin. So this is why unhappy teams don't perform as well as happy teams, right? We know that, but this is like the reason why. Because they don't trust each other as much then. They don't have as much empathy for each other. So you get bad communication, and it's a horrible spiral, right? Another big one, interesting for startups, stress. Stress also inhibits the production of oxytocin, okay? And I would say this is why a lot of agile methods work, is because one of the kind of principles of agile methods is to kind of shield developers from the stresses of, you know, when you did a waterfall project and you have a deadline and you've promised and you absolutely must deliver on that deadline. That makes you stressed, and therefore your performance declines. Instead of being more agile, you don't have that deadline in the same way. So, in summary, to have a highly productive team, you need lower stress, happier working environment with teams of high EQ people. Okay? I would say this isn't always easy in a startup culture, in a startup world, but it is possible, right? And it's not black and white. It's not like we can't have any stress. So, you know, but we should try and reduce it. We should look at deadlines and say, is that a real deadline? Like, if it's a market-led deadline, the Black Friday or whatever it was, like, yes, that's a real deadline. Like, we can't avoid that in our business, right? But there might be other deadlines that are just arbitrary, that some project manager or product owner has just come up with, right? We should push back on those. We should say, no, that's not necessary to have that deadline. We'll deliver when it's a good product, you know, and you tell us when it's good enough to deliver and to put live. And so finally, a stress-free environment with happy employees is not just a nice thing to do, because it is, and it helps you recruit and it helps you retain people, but it also makes really good business sense. And so when you're talking to business stakeholders and you want to promote this, you want to promote that we have a stress-free environment with happy employees, you don't just have to talk about retention and attraction and employer branding. You can also say, it actually means we have better performing teams. Okay, thank you.